Welcome to the Witchy and Wonky Podcast, a space for spiritual raving baddies embodying all things music, manifestation, mindset, and magic. I'm your host, Rachel Brady, a digital creator and storyteller who views festivals as portals, headbanging as healing, and raving as group therapy. Whether you're deep in your spiritual journey, reframing your subconscious beliefs, or just trying to figure things out, you are in the right place. Join me today as we lock in and get weird. Hello, my angels, and welcome back to another episode of the Witchy and Wonky Podcast. As always, I'm Rachel Brady, and as I create this episode, I have just completed 2 back-to-back festival weekends, which, as I'm sure you can guess, is not for the faint of heart. And while they both refilled my cup in their own special way, I definitely have been leaning into the grounding and reintegration portion of the festival life cycle, so to speak. The one this past weekend in particular was extremely transformative in the sense that a lot of things had to sort of crumble away, break down, crash out in order to reach the other side. And with the beautiful full moon that just came up as I prepare this episode, I am going through a personal tower moment, full disclosure. If you aren't necessarily familiar with what a tower moment is, it is in reference to the tower card in tarot, which stands for a sudden upheaval of your current reality, a big disruption. And if you are a tarot baddie like myself, you might have a love-hate relationship with the tower card. After all, if you look at its imagery, it does look pretty foreboding, a little scary. But I will say that after experiencing multiple tower moments this past year, I think there is space to both feel the frustration and confusion of a sudden upheaval, but also have the sense of trust and knowing in the uncertainty. We also refer to this as a sort of void in the manifestation, timeline jump, whatever you'd call it, space as well, where it feels like your current reality has completely shifted. Like you woke up in a different dimension, but what you've been calling in, your manifestations, whatever you are preparing for, has not necessarily shown up just yet. So it's almost like you woke up, but you seem like the only one who is tapped in, and you're just waiting for everything else to sort of just show up. So obviously a very discombobulated, even dysregulated feeling at times, absolutely. But I really wanted to lean into creating this episode and leaning into the creative flow that comes with exploring these sorts of topics. So, a long story short, this past week has just been an absolute energetic whirlwind, but the crash out is the portal and I've come out the other side, but trusting that plenty of rest, aligned action, and a beautiful full moon ritual will be the perfect medicine as we make this transition over to June. So our topic today revolves around what I've grown to lovingly name the side quest mentality. And this concept is rooted in detachment, which we've already discussed before on this podcast, I believe episode 3. So if you want a more in-depth, behind-the-scenes look into my personal detachment journey, and how it birthed from quite a few crash outs in my early festival career, feel free to listen to that one as well, because I do believe it is a more common occurrence than we realize to enter the festival space overwhelmed to the point where surrender is sort of the only option if you want to keep your journey sustainable. So although this topic can be useful to anybody who's interested in it, of course, it could be especially helpful for either new ravers that might be intimidated by the art of the side quest and just need some gentle encouragement, or even for those who have been in the raving game for a while but have noticed that they're either reaching this point of stagnation or have sort of been on autopilot and feel like they're just going to the events just to go. Either way, maybe you're sort of at a crossroads moment where everything might feel either too familiar or too uncertain. And funnily enough, from my experience at least, both of these can stir up feelings of discomfort in their own ways. And I think a lot of it stems from this notion of wanting to hold on to what feels safe to us, right? On one hand, if you feel like you've been having the same experience over and over and almost feel like this sort of burnout approaching, You might have a moment of wondering if you're stuck in a loop, doomed to repeat the same pattern. And of course, on the other hand, if this feels like unfamiliar territory, your brain might go into scanning mode, doing its best to predict and optimize so that you have this itinerary that minimizes detours or perceived things that can go wrong. And these are universal human experiences, these crossroad feelings. So if you resonate with any of this, I think this will be a beautiful, almost meditative episode for you to reflect on what you can take out of it and infuse into your own festival season. So, without further ado, let's explore the essence of the side quest, its relation to detachment, and how we can blend these two concepts together in order to expand our capacity for miracles, innovation, and synchronicity. So, with that, let's lock in and get weird. So to first get us all on the same page, some of us might have heard the phrase side quest, but not necessarily understand it just yet. So for a broad definition, a side quest is a spontaneous adventure or detour off the beaten path, either taken by a small group of people or solo, that deviates from the original plan. So the term side quest is used in a multitude of subcultures, but the way I was personally introduced to it was at the rave. So a lot of times, side quests at raves or festivals are micro moments that pop up in pretty unpredictable ways. You could either be walking to a set and notice something that catches your eye that you want to explore a bit more of. There might be an opportunity to participate in a collective side quest, such as a scavenger hunt, or maybe you just look over to your friend, ask if they want to go side quest, and use that as an opportunity to explore a different part of the festival or just wander around with no real end goal in mind. Now, as I'm sure you can imagine, a side quest in its essence can be open to many sorts of interpretations, but the commonality lies in its nature of being spontaneous, open-ended, and a sort of detour from the original itinerary. So, in short, it is a leap into the unknown, even just for a little while. So this also has many parallels if you are like me and enjoy traveling. So let's say you're exploring a new city with a schedule of tours to hit, landmarks to visit, reservations to book, but there's a little alleyway with a shop that catches your eye, or a local invites you to try a restaurant that wasn't even on your radar. These micro moments that draw you in and pique your curiosity, even if it's not on the original itinerary, speak to the heartbeat of the city and are glimpses into what it has to offer. So even if you haven't necessarily participated in side questing at a rave or a festival just yet, this is another point of reference that might resonate with you. So here is the kicker. Depending on which raver you ask, some of them absolutely love side quests and even prefer them compared to a more linear festival schedule, while others view them as more of an inconvenience. And mind you, there is plenty of gray area in between this. For example, there might be a festival that is a little bit more overwhelming or you don't feel comfortable navigating all by yourself, so the act of side questing might make you feel a little bit more out of control. On the other hand, there might be a smaller festival that's easier to navigate visually or has a more relaxed atmosphere, so side questing feels a little bit more organic and even encouraged. Or you might just have a different sort of emotional, mental, physical bandwidth that requires a bit more structured compared to if you went during another season of life. So I like to add these nuances in because I've definitely experienced a very full range of this. So we discussed this beforehand, but I will be the first to admit that my nervous system immediately rejected the idea of side questing when I first got my start raving. And for context, side quests aren't necessarily a part of the rave culture in England or Europe, which is where I got my start for a few years. So when I went to my first American festival, which was Lost Lands in 2024, I'm not going to lie, I was very much overwhelmed by many factors. The sheer scale of it, the hustle and bustle of it all, the multiple vendors, stages, activities going on all at once. And at the time, I only knew the one person who had invited me, so I was clinging on to any sort of familiarity I could in order to feel safe. So in hindsight, I definitely still have so much compassion for that version of myself that viewed side quest as almost a sort of threat to my sense of safety. But I am so grateful that I was able to evolve past that and view those triggers as a portal towards a more expansive outlook on how a festival experience can unfold. So it would be so easy for me to come on here and tell you, oh my God, I was so cringe and needy back then. But to be honest, it really was the biggest blessing to have those emotions of overwhelm come up, because I don't think that there had necessarily been an environment as intense as that to truly challenge my comfort zone when it came to parts of myself that were still in the dark. In our last episode, we discussed raving as a form of shadow work in providing opportunities for us to come face to face with parts of ourselves that we might have felt were too much, not enough, or that we were just plain ashamed of. And so I believe my initial resistance to side questing, met with a compassionate lens, was a universal call-in to explore my relationship with uncertainty and trust in the universe. And this is where we start to notice the connection with detachment and what started to form my sort of side quest mentality theory. What if our relationship to side quest as a whole is a direct reflection of our ability to lean into the unknown and treat raving as a trust fall? So let's explore this a little deeper. So when we discussed detachment in one of my first podcast episodes, we talked about the tendency for some of us to place our festival expectations on a pedestal. And what I mean by this is that sometimes if we feel like we have a limited amount of resources, whether that's time, energy, we have a very narrow, linear idea of what our ideal festival experience should look like. It's when we start to become overly locked in and fixated to concepts like needing to make the rail at a certain time, needing to meet up with these certain people at this certain time, needing to catch this set at this spot, needing to check all these boxes, to the point where everything else outside of this almost feels like a threat. Our attention becomes hyper fixated on a specific outcome with an emphasis on how it unfolds or how we believe it should unfold. And mind you, there isn't absolutely a time and place for proper planning or agreeing on festival goals we'd like to see play out, so hopefully you're able to discern the difference. One is an energy of, I hope this plays out, while another is, this better play out, if that makes sense. So releasing our grip on how we believe our festival experience should unfold, of course, is not an overnight process. It is not one size fits all. It is not a perfect one and done transformation. I will be the first to say that although I am so proud of how far I've come with this concept, there are definitely times that I still get tripped up if I feel like I'm lost or overwhelmed, but it's in those moments that I can catch myself spiraling, give myself grace, and take the time I need to recenter and even recognize it as a sort of fork in the road moment to ascend. That's the beauty of the festival dimension. Once you believe you've learned a lesson, it opens up a whole new layer of understanding that deepens your relationship with both the festival and yourself. So one helpful perspective shift that allowed me to start embracing the side quest mentality was to first view raves and festivals as their own dimension. So you might have heard me refer to the festival dimension quite a few times, but I truly believe that when we enter an immersive space that's rooted in a sort of collective, liberated, energetic agreement, our energy and the energy of the space just moves differently there. Our masks begin to drop, we start to feel that freedom, that expression, that almost sigh of relief from the real world. And while some might say that this is a form of escapism, it also can be a form of returning to self, a recalibration of sorts. And along with this collective energetic experience, also comes a more direct line of communication with the universe, higher self, source, and even among community. I'm sure if you've been in the festival game for a while, you can remember connections made that in the real world might have been fleeting moments, but the depth within the festival dimension made those connections hit even harder, and sometimes also could be difficult to explain outside of context in the real world unless someone has experienced something similar, of course, themselves. This honestly is why I consider my spiritual journey to be so closely interwoven with my raving and festival journey. I think that for many of us, it might sometimes be difficult to conceptualize something as grand as spirituality at times, especially when you start to add topics like consciousness, manifestation, co-creation, magic, unless we are introduced to some sort of environment that can serve as a container for us to practice and learn and grow. So, of course, spirituality encompasses all parts of our lives and holistic integration is the goal. But in my opinion, there is a reason why so many lessons, triggers, moments of epiphanies, and release occur at these festivals. I've said this time and time again, but they truly do have the potential to serve as mirrors into our inner worlds. And for some of us, they can become one of our preferred sacred grounds of self-exploration and liberation. So going back to shifting the lens from seeing a festival or a rave as a singular event that we passively participate in, that we show up, watch the DJs, go home, to viewing it as a more organic, dynamic container of energy, we can start to see how it would be this form of co-creation when we embrace the side quest mentality. So what do I mean by this? Let me cook. So I remember one day reading up on the festival Elements before going for the first time. If you are not familiar, Elements is a festival located in Pennsylvania that has multiple genres of EDM, so you've got house, techno, dubstep, drum and bass, and it's also an art showcase, so it has a lot of beautiful interactive places you can walk through. There are character actors, loads of activities, so a very choose your own adventure sort of festival. And I stumbled upon this Reddit post asking, what's one piece of advice you could give to someone attending Elements for the first time? And the first comment I read, the only one I really did need to read, was simple. Elements doesn't give you what you want, it gives you what you need. And I remember reading this and kind of got what they were saying, like I understood it on a very surface-based level. But when I took this sort of seedling of an idea and let it germinate throughout the festival weekend, I started to realize part of what they might have implied. So when you are in this dimension, you have the potential to be locked into what I call the festival frequency. So I always like to joke that festivals have their own sort of Wi-Fi network that you can log onto whatever, particularly when you've reached this sort of balance of presence and acceptance. So when you're giving yourself the space and grace to lean into the natural festival flow, you start to witness firsthand how your presence holds so much power, and you enter this sort of co-creative relationship with the festival that tells you no matter what you do, even if it seems off the beaten path or some random intuitive hit, trust the process and we will provide. And this might look different for everyone. Maybe it comes in the form of making connection with a new friend that had to occur by a domino effect of synchronicities. Maybe it's discovering a new artist that speaks to your soul that you have not considered had you not happened to pass by. Maybe it's running into an old friend that you end up having a conversation with that you ended up really needing. Or perhaps you just happen to stumble upon an art piece that, without words, speaks to you in a way you didn't even realize you needed. The takeaway is presence provides. When it comes to tapping into the festival frequency, it sort of feels like surfing a wave or going along a river. The more I force an outcome or connection, the more resistance I feel if it is taking my attention away from the flow. And the side quest mentality doesn't necessarily mean that you should just throw all planning to the wind and just let your energy be scattered left and right, but it does allow for a more expansive perspective of what a festival can provide us and how it can give back to us, and allow for a more symbiotic, energetic relationship that allows us to surrender just a bit more than we might be used to. It is, after all, a co-creative process, so structure absolutely has its place in the equation, but it allows for a much more direct, energetic ebb and flow that I believe we can see much more play out in real time compared to the real world. So how can we conceptualize the side quest mentality a bit more so that we start to figure out how it fits into our own personal raving and spiritual journey? Now, there are plenty of ways to go about this, so if you have any special takeaways that resonate with you that I don't discuss, please incorporate those as well, of course. But how I define it is the process of expanding our capacity to create micro moments of raving trust falls. It's noticing when we feel resistance towards an invitation to go off the beaten path, and knowing this discomfort isn't inherently wrong, but that we can take that micro moment of uncertainty and choose to be brave. And most importantly, the side quest mentality is remembering that uncertainty is fertile ground for innovation and synchronicity. After all, to expect miracles, we must also accept mystery. And so to embody this sort of mentality, like we said before, it does not have to be some squeaky clean before and after, nor should it feel like something you must fix within yourself. This is an organic unfolding, not a homework assignment. After all, the side quest mentality will manifest in different forms depending on so many factors, including the type of festival, your current season of life and bandwidth, and what it is you're seeking. Because for some of us, we do sometimes need that deeper, more intense dive into the rabbit hole of the unknown, while for others, even that slight little glimmer of synchronicity, the one that feels like a wink from the universe, is all we need to feel that connection with the festival dimension. So when it comes to putting this into practice, this is something that you can take at your own pace. One of the ways I like to whimsify it, so to speak, is to treat a side quest like a universal invitation to jump timelines. What happens if I go off autopilot, if I take my festival expectations off the pedestal and loosen my grip on how I believe there can only be one linear experience? What happens if I just say one yes to something outside my comfort zone? And how does that make room for the universe to pleasantly surprise me in a way that could have never been manufactured by a sense of urgency I made up in my head? And notice how we're keeping this a very curious, open standpoint, and even allowing ourselves to start small. Although, if you ask me, it can even take the tiniest intuitive nudge to create a grand unfolding of a festival experience that you didn't even realize was possible. The first step is immersing yourself in the knowing that there are infinite timelines and sequences your desires can play out, and that this is a sacred, energetic playground of possibility. And once you allow yourself to fall down that rabbit hole, you might surprise yourself with your newfound capacity for unexpected adventure. So I hope that this episode has given you some soul food for thought as we continue the festival season into the summer. It has definitely been a topic near and dear to me as I expand my own capacity for miracles on the other side of the unknown, both in my raving journey and my journey as a whole. After all, these musings are applicable to life, and it is a deep priority for me to be able to integrate the lessons that have surfaced from festivals into daily living. Although they may serve as a container for deeper understanding, it's also important to carry this wisdom daily for full embodiment. So if this episode resonated with you, I thank you so much for listening and truly appreciate you for being here as we lock in and get weird. If you happen to just stumble upon this episode and want to connect further with both me and my creative work, you can find all my socials in the show notes, with Instagram and TikTok both being under the handle Witchy and Wonky. And as always, I'm Rachel Brady. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you on the other side.